Afternoon, everybody. Thank you all for coming today. I want to call the December 11th meeting of the TTCC committee to order. Mayor?
Yes, I'd like to call the TPC meeting to order as well. As you can see, we have joint meetings, so we're gonna be playing a little banjo up here, so we're ready to go.
It's a duet. Yeah.
It is. And we'll start with introduction to Byron Chapman, Mayor City of Middletown, and also Chair of TPC.
Jim Urban, Planning Director, Oldham County.
Tanya Higdon, KYTC, Central Office Planning.
Matt Bowler, KYTC District 5. Tom Hall, KYTC District 5 Planning.
Bill Derrick, Mayor, City of Jeffersontown.
Dirk Golan, Louisville Metro Public Works.
Bernie Bowling, City of St. Matthews.
Alicia Harper, Bullock County Planning.
Matt Meunier, City of Jeffersontown.
Keenan Stratman, City of St. Matthews.
Jeff O'Brien, Louisville Metro.
Keith Griffey, Bullock County.
Barry Armstrong, City of Mount Washington.
Emily Liu was Louisville Metro Government.
Curtis Hockenberry, City of Shepherdsville.
Brian Dixon, Clark County.
Brittany Montgomery, Town of Clarksville.
Tony McClellan, Indiana DOT, Seymour.
Kevin Beatty, Town of Clarksville.
Jim Silverman, Oldham County.
Craig Butler, Louisville Metro Air Pollution Control District.
David Burton with Kipton.
Ashley Tenius, Kipta.
Andy Rush, Kipton.
Anne Marie Safer, Kipta.
Nick Bell, Kipton. Jeff Hogan, Target.
Sarah Berry, Kipta. Elizabeth Parker, Mark Early.
Jared Haley, Kipton. Brandon Ehoff, KYTC.
Erica St. Federal Highway, Indiana Division. Taylor Marion and Doc Seymour. Robin Logan and Doc Seymour.
Billy Harrison, WSB. Ryan McAllister, Citizen.
Tracy Burton, Kipta.
Mike King, Louisville Metro.
Okay, thanks everyone for being here for this end of meeting. Of course, it's the end of the year. We're trying to get some things accomplished, and one of the first items we want to do, we need to add one other item to this agenda. So, and that item is the UPWP amendment that you'll be hearing more about with KIPTA, but I'd like to add that to the agenda if we may. So I need a motion.
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Did we encompass both of these, you think?
I think that that's also on the TTCC agenda, so these again are dual. We're going to be repeating each other, I guess, but that's also for the TTCC. If anybody has any comments regarding that.
Okay, item number 2 is the minutes for the TPC. I'd like to table these to our next month due to our time element, if that's all right. Item number 3 is also the minutes for the TTCC. I'd like to table those for the next meeting. Item number 4 is our public comment period. Anyone wish to address these boards? Going once? Very good. We're moving on to number 5. Ashley, public meeting report.
It's short and sweet this month. On December 6th, we went to the Kentucky Association of Government Communicators meeting in Frankfort, where Elizabeth Bowling Schiller, our marketing representative for our rideshare program, Every Commute Counts, was elected to the board of directors for the statewide KAGC. So that was the only thing we've been to so far this month, but it was very productive. That's it. Any questions?
Hearing no questions, we're going to move on to number 6, Connecting Kentuckiana 2040 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, MPT. David, you're up.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to inform you that the document for the Connecting Kentuckiana 2040 Metropolitan Transportation Plan, the final or the draft document, has been completed. The next two steps that are required of this process in these two bodies, the TTCC and the TPC, are to go through public involvement, and we would like your blessings to be able to start that process. And then the second piece is the final action to adopt both the MTP and the TIP, but right now we're talking about the MTP. So what we're talking about is we are getting ready to enter into the public involvement phase of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan Update Connecting Kentuckiana 2040. And we sent out to the committees a link to the draft documents, hoping that you would get a chance to look at them and reach some level of comfort for us to be able to present this information to the public so we can then get feedback as we are required and as we think is just simply a good idea. As you may recall, at the November TTCC meeting, I made a presentation just to give you an update as to where we were with the MDP update. And as I told you then, things are looking really well. We've met all of the federal guidelines that we had to meet. We've met all the TPC information that they wanted us to make sure that we had included in the planning process. And now we just needed to complete that document, that draft document. We have one copy. Jeffrey, I think it's right in front of you. If you wouldn't mind holding that out. If anybody wants to take a look at the hard copy of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, this is it. Light reading, yes. The full document was also, like I said, made available to you online. So we are advancing from the November progress report to present you the document, the draft document, so that we can take it to the public. What I want to do is sort of touch on some of the highlights of that draft document. We have the introduction, the first chapter, which basically is the overview and introduces the various planning factors that we are required to respond to when we complete the update. The second chapter is the trends, forecasts, and forces. In this particular chapter, we look at the socioeconomic factors that help to define what types of issues we need to address. We looked at environmental justice, making sure we had addressed some of the issues in those areas. We considered freight and transportation. The transportation section just gives you a snapshot of what types of transportation facilities are there today. We looked at bike, ped, transit, all kinds of different transportation options that we thought we needed to consider in completing the update. And then the last is future forces, which is just that crystal ball look into what may happen, which might include scooters or autonomous vehicles or things along those lines. Next chapter kind of defines how we went through the project development or the plan development. What types of things did we bring into play to make sure that we were doing the best we could at this point in the process to come up with a plan that would meet what we think were the needs and issues that that you had helped us to define, and that we had also heard from the public. So we talked about the public participation efforts that have been taking place since 2012, since we really actually started putting some traction into this process. We talked about the visions and goals that the TPC adopted for this process. Performance management. I know you've been hearing a lot about that, and you're going to hear a lot more about it. In this performance management section, we talk about the measures and the targets that were given to us by the Federal Highway Administration, the Federal Transit Administration, but more importantly to this group, the measures and targets that you gave us to make sure that we incorporated into our planning process. Then we went through the first ever transportation planning portal project development process. And many of you worked through a lot of difficult transitions to this new process, but we think in the end it's worked out really well. Because you were able to use information that we had not used in the past, and then we were able to use that information as we continued with the process. So we think that we've really made the project development go a lot easier. And the last is environmental mitigation. We want to look at what other agencies might be considering when they look at transportation in our region. One of the things we did was we put together a large red flag inventory that we made available to you to help to define what types of issues you may or may not be addressing when you go forward with the project. Speaking of projects, the fourth chapter is investments. We have that financial plan, and as we talked to you back in August or September, I think it was, the transportation plan that we've developed right now meets the requirements of the Federal Highway and Federal Transit Administration. In other words, we have projected what types of funds we may have available, and we've looked at the project costs that you've given us. We've adjusted for year of expenditure, and we are within a reasonable budget, within that 10% window that we were shooting for, to say over the next 20 plus years, we should be able to go forward and complete all the projects that we've identified. And that's a very, and as you might expect with your own budget going 20 years forward, it's a loose should, but it gives us a reasonable idea that we are going to be able to move forward with the projects that you've given us. We talk about the group project categories that we've developed with your assistance, and how that's going to work going forward with the MGP and also the TIP. And then we've talked about the projects and programs themselves. I think we had around 275 projects that are included in the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, and we go into great detail with each of these projects in Chapter 4. Chapter 5 is the so what chapter. It tells us why we did these things, what it means, what it may mean as we go forward, which is a really important chapter. We brought in the performance management plan that you've worked with over the last couple of years now, and we brought you different targets and measures that we think that you need to help us to figure out that we're doing the right thing. We talked about environmental justice impacts. We talked about how the proposed projects interact with the ITS architecture. All things that are very important as we go forward. And then there's the air quality conformity analysis that we are required to go through. And as Andy presented, I think back in September, talked about the possible impacts this project may have on the air quality program. So from Chapter 5, we go to a very lengthy appendices. I'm not going to read these off to you, but there are several items that we want to make sure that you're aware of and can access pretty easily. Now, they aren't really required as part of the MTP development, but we thought that they were important, and they might help you as you take the MTP and you start looking at it, or looking at it online, or a hard copy. So the appendices that we think you'll find very, very useful going forward. So the draft document we believe is complete, and we are ready to begin public involvement. And what we mean by that is January 8th through February 7th, we want to have a 30-day comment period. And then following that comment period, we're going to ask the Transportation, or Ashley's going to ask the Transportation Policy Committee to form a comment review subcommittee, like she does all the time. And that comment review subcommittee is going to help us make sense of some of these comments that we're going to get as a result of this 30-day public involvement period. So those are the key dates or points that we want to make sure you're aware of. The how is also pretty important. Right now, we're looking at 8 public meetings throughout the 5-county area, 4 in Jefferson County, and 1 in each of the other counties, other 4 counties in our area. Electronic media presence. Ashley is going to be working hard to make sure that this thing is blasted out onto the web and through Facebook and social media and other types of tools that she has at her disposal. We're developing a story map, which is kind of new for us, but it's electronic summary that you can sort of step through the 400 pages of the transportation plan, hopefully in a few minutes. That will include a interactive map so that you can get better information about the projects and programs that are being proposed. And then public libraries will be making available to all of the public libraries in the 5-county area. We'll get a hard copy of the MTP, so that if anyone wants to go and look at it and hold it and flip through it, they can do that by going to the library, and then we can help them that way. So this is just a quick overview of the steps that we anticipate going through when we complete the public involvement. I've mentioned it in about 30 or 40 seconds. Ashley's already spent a great deal of time just trying to make sure that this goes off well, and we get as much comment as possible. So that's basically where we are with the Connecting Kentuckiana 2040. What we're asking of each of these bodies is to acknowledge the fact that they have had a chance to look at the document and that they're comfortable with the document going out for public review. We're not asking you to adopt the draft of the MTP at this point in time. That's gonna happen in February. We just want your blessing to go forward and say, okay, it's time for us to start collecting public comment. And we've reached that point where that can happen. That's all we're gonna be asking of you today, is to let us begin that process.
Okay, any question?
I'm sorry, I have a question. Again, Eric Tate, Federal Highway. So, has the Kentucky and Indiana Federal Highway Divisions had an opportunity to provide comment on the draft?
They have not yet. We plan on working with you and your counterpart in Indiana once the public involvement period starts.
Okay, so concurrently with public involvement?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and have the DOTs and transportation cabinet, is that the same for the?
Same thing, yep. And I might add, this is, if you haven't had a chance to look at anybody on these committees, that's also an opportunity for you to give us feedback as well. We want to make sure, most importantly, that this meets the expectations that you have for the MTP. And if there are things that we can do to improve upon it, this is your opportunity to let us know before we submit it to the Federal Highway, Federal Transit Administration.
Other questions? Jim?
Actually, what we need is a motion from the TTCC to recommend to the TPC that we allow the staff to put this out, the draft out for public comment.
I'll make the motion.
There's a motion, is there a second?
Who made the motion?
Dirk and then Felicia. Any questions on the motion? David, would it be easier, if you're on the TTCC and a voting member, if you'd raise your hand, all those in favor say aye. Raise your hand, aye. Any opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you. And the TPC would, needs the same motion to approve this, to approve the,
Second.
Very good, I like you, man. Keep going. Do they have a second for this motion?
Second.
Same again? Bernie? Bernie, all right. Same thing, if you, yes, would be raising your hand for the TPC. Raise your hand, please. Opposed, like sign. Hearing, seeing none. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, item number 7. Item number 7 is the KIPTA participation plan update. That's Ashley. Ashley, you're up, ma'am.
Just a second for this screen to warm up.
Let me get to the right one.
Okay, so you guys have heard from me several times throughout the course of 2019, but this should be the last time. We're going to ask for a participation plan update adoption, or the adoption of the 2019 participation plan update. This one? All right. The background quickly was that the participation plan was written in 2014, and we stated that it would be reviewed annually and updated every 4 years. So this would be the update for that. The 2019 update, we had a working group that met February through May. Staff began meeting, then we formed a working group with the TPC members. The comment period for the public was September 19th through November 2nd, but the document is still online for anyone who wanted to look at it. The link that was listed in the packet has been up since September 19th. There were 6 meetings held in the 5 MPO counties. We went to New Albany, Shepherdsville, Shively, LaGrange, St. Matthews, and Clarksville. We had 2 meetings in Jefferson County after hearing from someone who lives here that they thought our meeting in St. Matthews was not centrally located enough. So we had one in Shively to space out, since Jefferson County is so wide, make sure that we were adequately reaching all the people in Jefferson County who might want to talk to us. And we had print media for all of those newspapers. We did electronic advertising through the local media stations, a press release. We had Facebook posts and targeted ads, and we had Twitter posts. We did the Eventbrite meeting notification that most of you guys got for this meeting today to let people know there was a meeting. And we asked all of our planning partners to share all the social media that we were doing to try and promote the participation plan update. What we heard was primarily, it was in your packet, the amendment or the attachment to the item number was that we're still hearing people don't want to come here for TPC meetings. They want our meetings to be held in the evening and in a more transit-friendly location. We've been hearing that since 2014, so that is just something I'm making note of at this meeting, making sure that everyone is well aware that that's the biggest comment that we get when we talk about our participation. And the other comments, like I said, are in the attachment to this item number. One of the members of the public who's come to several of these meetings had some ideas about how participation could be done here, and that's something we might look at in the future. She's got some interesting ideas, and for now, we sent those to our TPC comment subcommittee members for their review, and they responded, and those responses are also in the packet. I responded to the emails and told each of the people who gave us a comment what the TPC members recommended. And then looking forward, David mentioned it, and I'm going to bring it up now. The TPC comment subcommittee was started prior to my start at KIPTA, so prior to 5 years ago. And we've had a hard time getting TPC members to meet to talk about the comments that we received. So we started sending out an email list, and we're still getting a really, really hard time having TPC members respond to the comments that we get from the public. So in an effort to make sure that the comments that we are getting from the public are being read by the TPC and actually digested and responded to, we might need to really look at how we look at the comments in the future, especially with a big MTP update coming up. We don't want comments from the public coming in and not getting any response from the TPC. We want to make sure that TPC sees the comments and responds to those, so we're doing our due diligence for the public. We're going to continue those annual reviews of the participation plan and all of the outreach that we've been doing, along with hopefully some innovative online, maybe live Facebook Live videos or some online workshops where people could look at our documents and maybe do a town hall type of question and talk to us. We've got some really interesting ideas for how to move forward with participation in all of our planning efforts. And we just want to make sure that we're continuing to build public trust, that when the public thinks about KIPTA, they know that we will listen to their comments and that they will be heard when we are doing our transportation planning processes. So at this time, I'm going to ask that we get a motion to adopt the participation plan update.
Questions?
Any questions? Anyone?
Yes.
Actually, so you emailed the comments out to TPC members, and I'm sure it crossed my inbox, and I just missed it for whatever reason. But do we ever? I mean, are you looking for ideas for how we can better engage in that, or responding, or?
I think that the issue was initially prior to me coming into KIPTA, some people said it was too hard to come to talk about the meetings and the comments in person. So there was a calendar put together. So from January to April, certain members of the TPC are the ones who would respond to those comments. And I can send out the calendar because I don't know how it was created prior to me coming here. So not the whole TPC wouldn't have to come and meet and look at the comments. There were just different members for each of the, January to April and then April to June, and it was broken up that way. So not all of the TPC members would have to come to the comment subcommittee meeting. So basically, we would just want to ask that when the email gets sent out with the comments, we are hearing from all of the members of the TPC comment subcommittee, or we would end up having to look at a different way to get the TPC to read the comments, since we didn't have a great turnout on that comment or the email that I sent out this year.
Do you have any feedback that you might want to consider?
No, I mean, my thought is I think it's always good to review the comments in an open meeting format. So whether it's perhaps a regular TPC meeting, just reserve time to review them, because I do think those comments are important. I mean, we have been getting the comment about problems accessing the meetings, and I think that's important. We need to be transparent, especially when we're talking about a large amount of dollars that come into the region in a formula fashion. I mean, I don't think that, I would argue that email, while it's a great way to organize people, it's not a great way for this personal thing. It's a great way for me to respond to comments. I'm happy to look at those comments comments, and I do have opinions and thoughts about each of the comments and responses for that matter, but I think it happens better in a dialogue. So not that I need another meeting on my calendar.
No,
but-
I agree with you. I agree. And I think that that is something for the MTP to be as completely transparent as possible. Email just won't work this time. We'll have a meeting for the TPC comment subcommittee members to go over all of the comments that we get from January 8th to February 7th.
And certainly for the MTP, I think that reviewing the comments that we get in an open forum, I think are, and again, I don't know even know if the subcommittees, I understand we put these things in place, but then to see how they play out practically in real life, I don't know that it works. And again, so I think, again, reserving time on an agenda to review and have a thoughtful dialogue would be important, especially for an update of this magnitude.
I think it's a good idea. I think we could do that. We just want to make sure that we get your feedback, because that's really what's been lacking. We used to provide comments to the committee and they would accept them, but we wouldn't get any feedback on that. We really want to know what you're thinking about the comments.
Yeah, well, I mean, I get it. Nobody wants to say out loud that, well, maybe we could have done that better, or that person's wrong, or they don't have all the facts. I mean, I get it. Nobody wants to say that in an open meeting forum. I mean, it's not the most comfortable thing in the world, but I think it's our responsibility that, we should be reviewing these things as open as possible. I'm just one voice, I'm sorry.
As the outreach person, I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Yes,
I totally agree with that comment. So I think that when we move forward, that's something that we will definitely pursue.
I agree. I think we're all here anyway for a meeting. Why not just make it part of the agenda, carve out time? I got a request to comment on the comments. I read the comments. I didn't do it right away and I lost it. I just never went back to it. So, it's a lot easier for us to try to address that, I think, here. And at least there's a reasonable dialogue amongst us as opposed to individually.
And I'm always happy to answer the phone when somebody calls me and says, I can't believe you made that comment about my comment. I'm happy to explain to them, not scared of it.
Oh, here, they could probably be added on the agendas then.
Yeah, I think so too.
And I'll pick on one of my own projects. I mean, I don't necessarily think that this group needs to hear another update about the Dixie Highway project, so I think that we could reserve some time about, to talk about the comments. I have a very good passion for the Dixie Highway project, but I think it's a more valuable use of our time to do these things.
Okay. Other comments?
Actually, I think it would be still helpful as whoever, if that's the full TPC body or a subcommittee, is that they get those prior to whatever meeting time. So, there's some thought process and not getting them cold in a meeting.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
Right now, we give them to you 15 days in advance of the upcoming TPC meeting. We can probably continue to do that.
I think they went out the middle of November.
Yeah.
November 15th. I think. I'm not sure. I don't have it in front of me, but I think it was November 15th.
Okay. We ready for a motion? Jim?
TTCC, we're looking for a motion to recommend to the TPC that they consider adopting the update to the KIPTA participation plan.
So moved.
Motion, is there a second?
Second.
Second. Any comment about the motion or question? Again, to sort it out, all those on the voting members of the TTCC, if you're in favor of the motion, raise your hand. Are there any opposed? Ayes have it.
All right. For the TPC, we also need a motion for adoption of the participation plan. Do I hear a motion? Second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor of TPC, please by raising your right hand. Opposed? Like sign, hearing none, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know.
Wait a minute, we
They
did-
didn't put their hand down. I don't know if that meant they voted twice.
Well, we in the city.
Stand it right, left.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Item number 8, physical year.
I want to see all of them.
Item number 8, fiscal year 2020 and 2025 transportation improvement program. Nick?
Yes.
Good afternoon.
Chairman. Okay. While this presentation gets loaded up properly, this presentation is going to sound a little bit like David's. Obviously, we're taking both the Connecting Kentuckiana 2040, the MTP, out in conjunction with the fiscal year 2020 to 2025 Transportation Improvement Program. This is our short-range budget, essentially, or program of funds for the entire 5-county region. This time we're going out to 2025, which is a couple additional years, just to help with, I think, planning and making sure that any project that has funding for, say, preliminary engineering, hopefully also has that construction towards the end of the document, if the timing works out. All of the public involvement activities that David mentioned previously that will be occurring in January and early February will be likewise for the Transportation Improvement Program. Quickly here, just an overview of the fiscal year 2020-2025 Transportation Improvement Program. I want to say thank you to every single person in here. I mean, their sponsors, stakeholders, general public, whoever who contributed to this. This was definitely a long time coming. Likewise with the MTP. Again, this is a 6-year plan. Last year was a 4-year plan. 4 years is the minimum. Our Transportation Improvement Program is fiscally constrained. We're not planning to spend more dollars in the region than we hope to or estimate to bring in. It also conforms to federal air quality standards. Obviously, the TIP is a subset of the long-range Connecting Kentuckiana plan. And so, like was mentioned before, Andy presented that conformity documentation to show that we are in conformance with those national standards. And obviously, there's new information about projects' potential contribution to our performance targets, whether they be federal, US DOT mandated, or MPO kind of assigned. So I just wanted to hit the highlights of what we have in the document. Obviously, the link was sent out with the meeting packet. There are also about 4 copies in here of the new TIP, the draft document. And so first chapter is basically an introduction. Chapter 2 is about the processes. So how do we go about, what do we have to do to go about creating a new transportation improvement program? What do we need to do when there's an amendment for projects that impact air quality? And then, our administrative modification policy is essentially when we make those minor changes, how are we doing that? How are we documenting them? And then finally, the group projects, which is something we've refined over the last year to kind of narrow down what is considered a group project with dollar amount thresholds and those kind of things. So there's some clarity about what's a regionally significant project versus what it's not. Chapter 3 dives into all the different funding programs, whether it's congestion mitigation air quality, highway safety improvement program, HSIP. There's probably 10 to 15 different programs in there that we sponsors regularly utilize in carrying out their transportation projects. There's also financial plans for every single program for every fiscal year of the TIP. And then the program of projects, that's something specific to TARC that's federally required to make sure, or that's something I think FTA checks to make sure that's in that document when TARC goes to apply for grant funds for any fiscal year, any different funding program. Chapter 4 is kind of a compilation of different planning documents that have gone into the TIP in various forms, including the performance management plan. There's columns and boxes for almost every single one of our performance measures, and those projects that have a plus in those tables indicate that they may have some potential contribution to that specific target. Chapter 5 is there's a variety of different MPO required reports that we have to do for the Federal Highways Indiana or FTA, including the annual listing of obligated projects. So every fiscal year we have to say, here's all the projects that had X dollars obligated that fiscal year so they could begin a particular phase, right-of-way construction, what have you. There's also more information on the MPO dedicated funds. So this is the pot of funds that the TPC has authority to award directly to sponsors in our region, that those actions aren't carried out by KYTC, NDOT, or TARC's formula funds. So these are dollars that you guys make decisions on, and so there's extra detail about those projects specifically. Chapter 6, again, is about air quality conformity analysis. Chapter 7, the MPO certification process. We went through that early last year. and that's done regularly. So we have a documentation about that and how we were certified by Federal Highways and FTA. Chapter 8 is the meat of the document. It's the project maps with listings by county. So you'll see Bullitt County, a map with all the projects laid out, and then listings in alphabetical order by project name for all of those with dollar figures, phases, and all that sort of information that's required of us. And then appendices, there's all sorts of different acronyms that we throw out there. So there's information there for the public, for you all to kind of reference as needed. There's a public participation section that's coming soon. Obviously, it'll recap whatever occurs during our public involvement period in January and early February. So again, the next step is our public involvement process. I'm not going to get into all this. This is very similar, 30-day comment period. Documents are going to go out to all the libraries, 8 public meetings, what have you. It's exactly the same as what David described. For the MTP, we'll be carrying out the same processes in conjunction with all of those. I can take any comments or questions you might have before I ask for action.
Questions?
Sorry, I have another question.
Yes.
And this actually also pertains to the MPP. So Ashley, you mentioned some sort of virtual tools. Are they all sort of in-house? Like for the story maps, are you using Esri?
Yes, it will be,
Okay.
yeah, ArcGIS.
And then like, are you using any kind of MetroQuest kind of tool, or is it like in-house kind of commenting on the maps and for the public comment period for those two?
Go ahead, Ashley.
Based on constraints, budget constraints, we will not be using anything from MetroQuest. We are going to use the in-house tools, and the maps that we've seen from our GIS team look great, and it looks like they're gonna have just as many opportunities. It might not be as fancy as MetroQuest, but again, budget constraints. So we're hoping our in-house tools work great for this particular outreach.
Awesome. And so the public will be able to comment on the map?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes, you'll be able to click on a specific project and give a very focused comment there or question, and then those will all be reviewed and sorted and filtered by staff. And there'll also be an opportunity for just general public comments. And we're hoping to use that story map as the kind of go-to for the public, at least electronically, outside of our public meetings, and that'll I think drive a lot of comments hopefully.
Our GIS team has done a really good job, and I think the public will not know the difference between MetroQuest and what we've done in-house. So I think we're in really good shape with that.
Yep, thank you.
Other questions? Jim?
Okay, we're looking for a TTCC motion to recommend to the TPC that the draft of the 2020-2025 Transportation Improvement Program be put out for public beginning in January.
So moved.
The motion, the second.
Second.
You get that, Dirk and
Now, who's the first again?
Dirk and
Dirk,
Felicia.
okay. and-
Felicia.
Okay, got it.
Chairman recognizes Felicia. She was straight down the aisle. Any questions about that motion? Again, anybody who's a voting member of the TTCC who wishes to vote in favor, please raise your right hand. Anybody in opposition, raise your hand. Ayes have it.
All right, same for the TPC. We do need a motion to approve the Transportation Improvement Program, to put it out for public in January 2020. Need that motion. Good. All in favor, raise your right hand.
Right hand there, Jay.
Thank you. Opposition, same sign. That motion does carry as well. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Item number 9 is physical. Number 9, fiscal year 2018 to 2021. Nick, you up again, sir?
Yes, thank you.
The TIP program.
Yes, this is an administrative modification to the current 2018 to 2021 TIP. A revised handout was provided next to the meeting packet. We had 2 project changes that came in after the meeting requests that are kind of important just to help move these projects along. These are all considered minor changes to projects, so shifting dollars here or there. So we're not adding any projects, deleting any projects, or anything of that nature. The first one is KYTC Kentucky 146 sidewalks in eastern Jefferson County. They're going to be able to advance that construction up a year, so that's a great thing. That's one of the projects that's in our NPO dedicated funding program, so always good to move construction up. Louisville Metro is moving some funds between utility and design to make sure that they can proceed with final design on the Brook Street ramp project. And then finally, on the back, there's a correction from Administrative Modification 38 clarifying the change to that project. So again, this is just information. I can take any questions or comments at this time.
Questions, anyone? Hearing none, and there's no action required there, right?
No, sir.
Okay, item number 10 is our other business, the UPWP. David, you're up. Yeah,
Mayor, I'm passing those in that direction. Okay, what's coming around the table is something that we're asking the committees to consider. It's an amendment to the Unified Planning Work Program for to add two studies for TARC, or two TARC studies. Some funds have been made available through the office, through KYTC's Office of Transportation Delivery. And this has been happening rather quickly, so we have been trying to take advantage of this opportunity and amend the UPWP at this meeting. Jeffrey Hoban of TARC is here. He's a member of our committee. If there are questions, or Jeffrey, if you want to offer any clarity, that would be very helpful.
I see folks reading. Please continue. I'm happy to answer any questions. I'd just like to point out, I guess, that while this was a very, so it was a surprise, not just to all of you, but to TARC as well. The opportunity to acquire funds that had not yet been obligated, planning funds that hadn't been obligated by the state from federal fiscal years 2017, 2018. In addition, there is no risk, I will put it that way, to the MPO by amending the UPWP simply to add the projects. If we cannot, for whatever reason, work out the legal issues, the financial issues associated with the agreements between the cabinet, KIPTA, and TARC, then the projects would simply remain unexecuted in the UPWP. It was at the Transportation Cabinet's request that we try to make that amendment now, because they are beyond ready to file the grant application with the FTA to obligate the funds. Happy to answer any questions.
This 20% match?
TARC would be matching 20%.
And how does this fold into the current comprehensive operations analysis?
It is follow-up to the COA.
Does TARC have the availability to, if they say go 100% electric? Because I understand they don't have the funds to probably buy buses now, much less electric buses.
Well, as you may or may not know, we did just receive a boon in that regard. We got a substantial award from a discretionary program. About 4.5% of the total funds available nationwide came to Louisville. So that's certainly a help. But in addition to dealing with our ongoing deficit issues, our new management, new executive direction is looking for ways to re-obligate capital formula funds for actual capital purposes. We have been contributing those funds to the allowable operating categories, preventive maintenance and capital cost of contracting, for the better part of 15 years, 99% of those funds. If they were freed up, we could meet all of our capital requirements, not just bus revenue fleet replacement. So we're looking for ways to do that. You might also note, if you looked into the TIP, the new TIP, in the most recent update of our capital improvement program, you will see that for planning purposes at any rate, we are absolutely planning the transition to phase out any additional acquisition of diesel revenue fleet equipment. We would like to do that. It is just a very complicated process because there's a lot required in addition to the vehicles themselves. Infrastructure, planning, lots of system and route planning.
Is there any estimate to how much that would save annually, but if it, once converted?
Once we've completed conversion, I would put it as a percentage, easily 20% of the maintenance budget. And assuming some cooperation, perhaps incentivization from our utility, which has been done elsewhere in the country, on an annual basis, fuel savings could be easily another 20%, maybe greater. But one of the things that study would look at is life cycle costs, comparative life cycle costs of equipment.
Another question, assuming you're also going to look at the charging stations, right?
Yes.
As part of the study right now, there's one on Third Street, you get on the bus, you have to stop there for 15 minutes.
This was an entirely different modality with regard to charging, and that's the reason the infrastructure investment is so critical and so important to understand, because at this point in time, it is highly unlikely that we would do any further en-route fast charging of buses. It's unattractive to the utility, it's expensive from a demand cost perspective, and it doesn't suit very many routes. Instead, we'd be looking at overnight depot charging. And when you talk about depot charging 200 buses at the same time, in the same period of time, you can begin to understand the infrastructure challenges.
There had to be a huge environmental impact to it too, and they're going electric. Less impact.
There's
than diesel.
There's a massive impact because, well, from both the maintenance and the environmental standpoint. We've had a tremendous increase in cost in diesel buses. A new diesel bus, I just got a quote, is just about $500,000 now. 20% of that cost, I'm using 20% a lot on it. 20% of that cost, at least, in the last 10 years, is associated with EPA required emissions after treatment. So, selective catalytic reduction, particulate matter. And that is also the cause of a great deal of reliability concerns with our fleet. When you move to electric vehicles, you eliminate all of that. You eliminate fluids to a very great degree. You eliminate lubricants even to a very great degree. And dependent on the source of your electricity, you can tremendously reduce not just the point source, which is at the curb, which is very important, of emissions, but you can reduce total emissions. So yes.
Sounds like a good idea to me.
We very much like to do it. It's understanding how to do it and how quickly we can do it.
Good question. You know, one thing that I personally, of course, the planning for your studies and your routing, I've been on this board for a good many years, and I know we fought hard to get routes out to the eastern part of Jefferson County and Oldham County, and we would sure hate to see those curtailed or reduced, just trying to save money on somewhere else. And I know money's money, but still, that extension of park is one of the things that we've all been fighting for here on this.
Sure. You may be aware, Mayor, that over the last 15 years, TARC has shrunk its revenue fleet, fixed route revenue fleet, as opposed to its paratransit fleet, has shrunk about 20%. They're at using it again. And our service has shrunk substantially, and that's entirely because of operating constraints and deficits. And that is primarily because of the increase in the service area, in the size of the service area.
I mean,
The city's growing, it's doing well.
It's growing geographically.
Right. No doubt.
In a much more rapid way than it's growing demographically. And density has not increased. And so we are going further and further to serve fewer and fewer on a per mile basis. And our per mile costs have increased substantially. So any changes to service to the entire community, that would reduce the amount of fixed route local service, would intentionally only be short term, while we find ways to become more cost effective and other means to serve cost effectively, to connect people. We're looking at every way we can. Mass mobility as a service is one of the critical ways we're looking right now. We're trying to create a platform that makes it possible to not simply plan, pay for, and utilize transit, but every other mode available, including the Ubers and Lyfts of the world, the scooters, the bike share, Luvelo, to collaborate with them so that people can complete an entire trip, first mile to last mile, whether or not they can do the entire thing on a heavy-duty 40-foot transit bus.
Sure.
So when y'all do the study, is that also not only include the bus, does it include the charging stations that maybe have to be around the county?
The fleet electrification study? Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to look at, we may find, because of the electrical utility infrastructure demands, that we simply cannot charge 200 buses in the same day. We may have to reopen our former operations, which is now just a unit shop on the west end, and split that capability. We may have to redesign routes somewhat to maximize the efficiency of a bus that has a 250-mile maximum range in a day, in one charge cycle. There are tons of considerations.
That's all within the study.
It would all be covered within the study. And there are plenty of consultants out there that would be very happy to perform that work.
More questions? Jim?
So we'd be looking for a motion from the TTCC to recommend to the TPC to amend the fiscal year 2020 Unified Planning Work Program to include the two new TARC planning studies, contingent upon the completion of necessary agreements.
Make a motion to add the TARC planning studies to the UPWP.
Second.
Motion and second. Any questions? Again, all TTCC members voting in favor, please raise your hand. Either hand is fine. Anybody in opposition?
Metro, yeah.
Anybody in opposition? Raise your hand. Ayes have it.
All right, thank you. For the TPC, also, we need a motion to amend the fiscal year 2020 UPWP to include the two new TARC planning studies contingent upon the completion of the necessary agreements. Need a motion? Motion and a second. And in this case, please raise your right hand if you agree. Opposed, raise your left hand. Motion carries. Thank you. All right, any other business to come before the board? I guess Merry Christmas. We'll see you guys next year, and I need a motion to adjourn. Second?
Second.
All in favor, raise your left hand. Thank you. Thank you.
Stand up and dance.